first have prayers by the Archdeacon of Southend.
Thank you very much indeed. Good evening, everybody. It's good to be here. For the first time in about 9 months, I've had a very short break away, and I went to Scotland, to the Highlands near Aviemore, to stay with some friends. And while we were there, we went to Brodie Castle, the home of the Brodie clan. So if there's anyone here who's from the Brodie clan, then you know what I'm talking about. And they have the motto, Unite. Nothing to do with the union, I hasten to add. And when we were being shown round the castle, we were shown this dinner service, which had many hundreds of pieces, all hand-painted in China. And all of them had the crest, the motto on their Unite, except 2 pieces, which they had misspellings. Instead of unite, they had untie. Only 2 letters out of place, but crucially changed the meaning of that motto. A fine line between the positive and the negative, between unity and disunity. Well, unity is a vital part of the Christian faith, as we can read in a number of Bible passages. We read in Psalm 133 from the Old Testament, how good and pleasant it is when God's people live together in unity. And in the New Testament, the Apostle Paul writes to the people of Ephesus, make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. I'd like to encourage you all as council and community in all that you do to support the community of which we live, to live and work together in unity, which doesn't mean uniformity, but to live together in unity, with a determination to work together for peace, a peace in our community, a peace that the world at large is struggling to know. So let us pray. First of all, a prayer for St. George's Day. Heavenly Father, give us the bravery of St. George to stand up for what we believe. Give us the strength to overcome the difficulties in our lives and in the world. And where we see people in distress, give us the compassion to help them. And a prayer of thanksgiving and for this meeting this evening. Lord God, you have taught us that we are called to live together. We thank you for the community of which we are a part, for all who share in its many activities, and for all who serve its varied interests. We pray for all who are members of this council and represent the people in this district of Rochford. Through this meeting, and as they work together, we pray that this council may be given sacrificial courage in order to enrich the welfare of all whom they serve. Through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. I do hope you have a good, positive and unifying meeting this evening, one which is carried out with great peace. I'm sorry I can't stay to be with you, but as I go depart to my next meeting, I'll hold you all in my prayers and look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Apologies.
Good evening, councillors and members of the public. We have a very, very full agenda this evening. Can we please keep to the main points of each item? If you find you are too hot, yes, please take your jacket off. Right, the first item is apologies for absence. I have Councillor Mrs Butcher and Councillor Mrs Julie Goodin and also Councillor Terry Cutmore, and I believe Councillor Mike Steptoe wants to just say a few words.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. As many of the members will know here, that are here this evening, Terry was taken into hospital in the early hours of Monday morning. I spoke to him yesterday and he was a bit groggy yesterday, but I did get an email from him this evening. It's actually timed at 16:48, so about 10 to 5. And he very simply says, Mike, just left hospital, absolutely dead on my feet. Regards, Terry. So I think he's on the mend, but I'm sure we'd all be happy to send our best wishes to him and hope he gets well soon.
Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. Councillor Mason.
Chairman, I'm very, oh, that's amazing this evening, isn't it? I hope it'll calm itself down. Chairman, I'd like to echo the thoughts of Councillor Steptoe by saying, of course, we wish Terry a speedy recovery, and I've already wished him luck in the county council elections, so I wish him luck in his recovery as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Number 2, minutes of the extraordinary meeting held on the 14th of February and the meeting held on the 21st of February. Are these agreed, members?
Agreed.
Number 3, to receive declarations of interest. Councillor Mrs June Lumley.
Thank you. Non-pecuniary interest in item 6 and item 17 as committee member of Sanctuary.
Thank you, Councillor Lumley. Councillor George Ionu.
Non-pecuniary interest in items 6 and 17 with Sanctuary.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ian Ward, please.
Madam Chairman, declare a non-pecuniary interest in items 6 and 7 as a member of Sanctuary, 6 and 17 as a member of Sanctuary Housing Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Ian Ward.
Chairman,
Are there any other interests at all?
Chairman, if I may, just to clarify on these members' interests, advice was given prior to this meeting to the members about their non-pecuniary interests, and because of their involvement with Sanctuary Housing, it may give rise to the perception of bias. Therefore, they've been advised that they may want to leave the chamber prior to the debate and will not be taking part in the vote.
Thank you very much on that. Number 4, announcements from the chairman, leader or head of paid services. I believe Councillor Steptoe, are you going to do a report this evening? No?
No, that's under 12.
Oh yeah, no, apparently not yet. Number 5, public questions or notice, there are none. Number 6, presentation of the petition pursuant to procedure rule 11. John Bostock will say a few words first.
Point of order.
Councillor John Mason, do you want to say something?
Chairman, I was indicating that I'd like to speak when the petition has been presented.
That's fine, Councillor John Mason.
Pursuant to the Council Procedure Rules, a petition has been received from Mr Richard Lambourne containing 1,646 signatures, which means it's reached the threshold, 1,500, at which it will be debated at full council. In accordance with procedure rules, the petition organiser or a person acting on their behalf will be allowed a maximum of 5 minutes to present the petition. Members will be allowed a maximum of 15 minutes for debate. Debate should be directed to action required by the petition. The authority is in the period of purdah, which does not preclude the continuation of council business, but means that members are not to refer to the county council election campaign. The petition relates to matters that fall within the district council's remit. Following debate, the council will decide how to respond to the petition by either taking the action requested in the petition, not taking the action requested for reasons put forward in the debate, or commissioning further investigation into the matter. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Can I please invite Councillor...
No, the petitioner first.
Yes.
Can I please invite Councillor June Lumley to do a statement?
Thank you, Chairman. Making this statement as portfolio holder for community, and then I will leave the chamber. The offer from Sanctuary Housing Association to enable Francis Cotty Lodge to provide temporary accommodation within the district for our homeless families is a tremendous opportunity for the council. We have so far managed to meet the statutory duty placed on the council to provide emergency temporary accommodation, but at an ever-increasing cost and by using B&B accommodation located outside of the district. Having the opportunity to use Francis Cotty Lodge will, therefore, enable us to more effectively meet local need as people who find themselves homeless can stay in the district where they will have local connections, for example, close to home, work, schools and local support networks. I am sure we would all agree that placing residents in B&B accommodation outside of our district should be an action of last resort. In addition, at a time of increasing demand for homeless services, Francis Cotty Lodge also provides a significant opportunity to assist the council in reducing the considerable cost of B&B accommodation, a saving for both the council and the council taxpayer. Our agreed budget already includes savings from the use of Francis Cotty Lodge. There are no legal restrictions on Francis Cotty Lodge which prevent the council from using the property as temporary accommodation for homeless families, and there is no planning change of use. This is a residential property in a residential area, and it will continue as such. There is no doubt that seeking to provide suitable temporary accommodation for our homeless families poses a significant challenge for us all, and the use of Francis Cotty Lodge should be seen as an opportunity to not only meet our statutory duties and minimise costs, but most importantly, to help local residents with a critical housing need stay connected to the district. We are looking at other options, of course, but in addition to Francis Cotty Lodge, not an alternative, which reflects the scale of the challenges we are facing. Finally, if the council did pass up this opportunity, there can be no guarantees of the alternative arrangements that Sanctuary Housing Association might put in place. There are no restrictions on the residential occupation of the building, and it might, for example, be offered to other councils to assist their homeless problems. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor June Lumley. You're about to leave now, are you? I understand Mrs. Michelle Newton is going to present the report instead of Richard Lambourne. Would you like to come forward, please, Michelle? Michelle, you will have 5 minutes. When we get to 4, I'll let you know we've got a minute left. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Our petition was raised against the change of use for Francis Cotty Lodge from sheltered accommodation for the over 55s to temporary accommodation for the homeless, and the removal of the over 55 requirement for the Clarence Road flats. The petition exceeded the number of signatures required to force this debate due to the significant objection of local residents. Our first concern is the impact on the elderly residents being forced to move from their homes. Some residents have lived at Francis Cotty Lodge for a considerable time and have been caused worry and anxiety, which is detrimental to their health. Moving to different accommodation is not only stressful, it may require a change of GP, pharmacy and other care providers. In fact, Age Concern quotes on its website, moving an older person from a home where they have been resident for a long time is likely to have a serious impact on their way of life. They also state that if residents have a reasonable expectation that their home would be their home for life, moving them may actually be a breach of their human rights. Emma Keegan, Managing Director of Sanctuary Housing, stated that residents would be given a maximum of 3 offers of alternative accommodation, after which they would be evicted. We would like the Council to consider the lack of compassion for the elderly residents. We object to the proposed use of this facility as temporary accommodation for the homeless. The building is already detrimental to the area due to its dilapidated condition. Sanctuary Housing has a poor reputation for maintenance, and this is evident. They cannot be trusted to maintain and monitor this facility at an acceptable and safe level. This was illustrated by the recent fire at Spa Court in Hockley, where only 5 out of 48 smoke alarms activated. The intention is to vastly overpopulate the building. Although we were led to believe the occupants will be predominantly Rayleigh families with children in local schools, it is now apparent that there will be a combination of single people, couples and families, most of whom are expected to be vulnerable and unemployed. The statistics provided by Rochford Housing ending October 16 state that only 2% of homeless applications were from Lodge Ward, and out of 152 applications, 45 were from Rayleigh. The response to my request for information under the Freedom of Information Act confirms that as of 31 January 17, 9 households from Rayleigh were in bed and breakfast accommodation provided by the council. Residents would consider it fairer to distribute temporary accommodation across the district into smaller units, which we understand from a former housing officer was the preferred policy prior to this proposal. The impact of such a large population concentrated in a small area of Rayleigh, which is not currently affected by homelessness, is unfair. The continuous lack of information and the secrecy has contributed to our concern, together with the absence of response from Louisa Moss and June Lumley. This is a strong opposition that deserves to be heard. The over 55 age restriction for the Clarence Road flats has been removed, but there is no guarantee that they will not also be used as temporary accommodation in the future. Emma Keegan states that there will be a nominations agreement or similar legal agreement between Rochford District Council and Sanctuary Housing. Will the content of this agreement be available on the Council's website, and will the terms be subject to review by this chamber? The concern is that Francis Cotty Lodge will become run down and undesirable, stigmatising the entire area. Surely it would be preferable to have 2 or 3 units available for temporary accommodation within buildings with permanent sanctuary residents. Not only would this reduce the density of population of Francis Cotty Lodge and the potential associated problems, but would be much better for the temporary residents, as they would not be marked out as homeless. It's been advised that there will only be a warden provided in the daytime and on weekdays, and we consider this to be inadequate. The cost of housing people in bed and breakfast accommodation or homes outside the area has constantly been mentioned as a reason for the change of use. Has a cost comparison study been undertaken, and exactly how much money will be saved, and can that be presented to the council and not exempt? We're aware that the council owns offices in South Street which could be converted to residential use. We don't want another Acacia House. We note that Essex County Council is redeveloping Roachway School. There are revised proposals for Bulwood Hall. The police station in Rochford is being developed, and land at Cagefield Close is being sold. All of these are possible alternatives. In conclusion, we ask that you support our petition, or at least you defer any vote until you receive a fully costed project plan for the next 5 years and a nomination agreement approved by full council with fixed performance criteria and end date. We would like to thank everyone for their time and sincerely hope that as our elected councillors, you will consider the strength of feeling in the community and take the time to reconsider this plan and be prepared to look at alternative solutions, including whether Sanctuary are the best partner for such a facility. Thank you.
We have 15 minutes in which to debate on this item. Can we please stick to the points of the item? And I've got a few names to begin with. Councillor John Mason.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, do you think it'd be a good idea to just turn this off?
Just try that one instead.
Chairman, whilst I agree with many of the concerns and complaints made by residents, including the way that existing elderly tenants seem to have been treated, I'm afraid I can't agree with the conclusive request of the petitioners. I'm going to explain why. Nationally, 50% of homeless families are women with 2 children. I don't want them, or any other composition of homeless families, to be sent to B&B in Southend, or even worse, in Kent, Pitsea or Harlow. Their lives are here, and with 90 families or more from our district needing temporary accommodation, this was undoubtedly the quickest means of housing them in the district, much nearer than to their previous homes, families and schools. We will need, as a district, as a council, more temporary accommodation in our district. And I am sure that there will be, in other parts of the districts, similar facilities, not just Rayleigh. I'm not happy about the way the council and Sanctuary have carried out this project, and that is something the residents have put. And there are many, many questions I've got listed here that I would like to ask. But we don't have the time this evening, Chairman, as you've put, to ask all of these questions and enter into a debate longer than 15 minutes. So I move that Review Committee carry out an investigation and put recommendations back to full council. That, Chairman, fits with the third option, which is commission further work. Thank you, Chairman.
I would second that, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor John Mason. Thank
I'll
you,
second
Councillor. Councillor Bob Milne, please.
As a ward councillor, I've had a serious look at the situation, and the background that there's a lot of misinformation on the internet about this. In considering the petition, the background is that by 2015, Francis Cotty Lodge was half empty and there were no over 55s queuing up to get in there. It's because this is a high home ownership area and people prefer disabled facility grants and don't want to move into single room bedsits in an old-fashioned block. Now, this was against a demand for emergency homeless accommodation, mainly by local families, and a lack of affordable accommodation in the area, and led to us using bed and breakfast. Now, Sanctuary Housing took the decision, in light of the fact, as I understand it, that they were going to refurbish Francis Cotty Lodge to move, and they were going to move the residents out. That was the situation when I was elected. I didn't know about the homeless situation. And they were going to use the block as a temporary accommodation. The council did not plan or instigate the change of use. In any event, there's never been a caveat that you have to be over 55 to live in Francis Cotty Lodge. The truth is there are no elderly people queuing to get in there, and there has not been any complaints from the existing residents about moving out. In fact, most of them are actually very pleased with what they've got. I understand there's only one person still left. In a year's time, I suspect anyone walking along Clarence Road would just see Francis Cotty Lodge a refurbished block and nothing more. Now, the poorly drafted, in my view, Rayleigh Action Group leaflet, which has got some misleading features about it, does not mention the vital fact if the council complies with the petition, then we will not have nomination rights, and then Sanctuary could move anyone in there from anywhere. So for that reason, we should not vote to adopt the petition. It's not within the council's authority to prevent that happening. Now, the costs of Francis Cotty Lodge, as we've been asked about it, is zero because we do not collect the rents, we do not own the building. So there's zero cost virtually to the council. And the council cannot sell off rooms in Francis Cotty Lodge to other authorities, as implied on the internet and Facebook site, Radio Action Group, purely because we don't own it. So the council, in my view, then should not adopt the recommendations in this petition, although there is an issue to do with calling into review, which I agree with John Mason.
Thank you, Councillor Muir. Councillor Mrs Sherrill-Rowe, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Do I agree with the way Sanctuary have dealt with this? No, I don't. Do I support the petition? Absolutely not. Over 1,600 people have signed this petition and have clearly been misled. I personally have not had many calls on the subject, but those that have contacted me or stopped me in the street are stunned when I tell them what they have signed, and that is to not look after our residents within our district. I also find it bizarre as to how many children have signed this petition. Clearly this is a numbers game, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Councillor Chris Black, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'll be brief. I don't know whether any children did sign this petition, or whether maybe, but if you've got to get to 1,500 odd, even if it's only 1,000 adults who've signed it, then if 1,000 adults, 1,000 residents in our district sign a petition, then I think they certainly deserve 15 minutes discussion. In fact, I think 15 minutes is rather on the short side if it's important enough for residents to feel like this. I could talk a lot, but I won't. I'll just say I support Councillor Mason's proposal to go take it to review committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Black. Councillor Mrs Christine Mason, please. Thank you, Councillor Mrs Christine Mason. Councillor Michael Hoy, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm speaking to the motion, which obviously I seconded, and I'm going to be brief. People have raised many of the points I was going to raise. I agree with many of the points in the petition. I don't agree with all of it, as I've said. Homelessness is a real problem in the area, and I think we really need to deal with it. I'm very unhappy with how Sanctuary operate. I've experienced the moving elderly people out of Tyndale House in Holbridge, and they refer to the process as decanting, which I don't find appropriate in any way at all, and I think they've referred to that in this case as well. And I feel their lack of communication in this is very poor. I also think that we as a council have not, or as councillors even, haven't been very well informed of what's been going on. We were aware of it, but we haven't been as fully briefed on this as we should have been throughout the process, which is why I believe it should come back to review, which is why I'm seconding the motion. I would also add to Councillor Sherrill-Rowe, I'm not sure how many children have signed this petition. Why can't a child sign a petition? They're residents still. Just because they haven't voted for any of us doesn't mean they're not residents.
Thank you, Councillor Michael Hoy. Councillor David Sperring, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've listened to the comments made by some of my colleagues, and by and large can fully agree with a lot of what is being said. However, I do have some concerns with regard to the whole situation. I think we were all pretty concerned about Sanctuary and the way they operate. I don't think there's any doubt about some of those issues. My concern is what can we actually do with them? And in that basis, I listened to what Councillor Mason and Councillor Hoy have said and their proposal, but I couldn't support that. My concern is, and I will say that I will propose that we take no further action on this occasion and do not comply with the requests. And my reasons for this, I support the statement that Councillor Lumley made and the issue she raised there. I think that nobody has reiterated that Council has a statutory requirement to home our homeless people. That several presentations that I have received, and as has fellow councillors, I don't think there's any doubt that there are substantial savings to be made if we use Francis Cotty Lodge. We can argue about figures, but I'm quite comfortable that there are considerable savings. Francis Cotty Lodge is not the only area of potential use for the homeless. And last but not least, charity, in my view, begins at home. We need to look after our own homeless people, and I have great concerns that if we don't take this opportunity and utilise Francis Cotty Lodge, Sanctuary will not wait for us to go to review committees. They will do whatever they want to do, and before we can go back and do whatever, they will have moved in homeless people from other boroughs. And I'm very concerned that if we don't take the opportunity, somebody else will.
Thank you, David Smith. We've got 4 minutes left, and I've got 3 more speakers. Councillor Simon Smith, please.
I do believe succinctly summed up the issues that we've got. We have a problem. It's right here. It's right now. There's a number of points been made about how this issue has developed, but I do believe that the fact that people are wanting to live in their own homes through disabled facilities grants, the fact that Francis Cotty is of substandard, and I do believe that was admitted by the petitioner, and of course part of any refurbishment, however it happens, involves people moving out. So in view of the fact that the problem is immediate and that we're looking at serving our residents, then I do believe that we need to move forward on this straight away and not take any further action on the petition. If something else were to be examined later on by review committee, that's a matter for review committee. But I don't believe that it is right now to delay anything any further with this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hookway, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I have been listening to the debate this evening. I understand from planning law there is no change of use in relation to Francis Cotty Lodge, but obviously there is an aspect which the community views that there is a change of use. We do have responsibilities to house homeless people that fall in our area, and it is obviously right for us to try our best to find appropriate accommodation for them. I do have concerns about how Sanctuary have behaved in relation to this matter, although we have limited ability to control what they may or may not do. However, I am going to support the motion because I think it is appropriate that the review committee should look at this and also other aspects of homelessness in our district. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Really, I just wanted to second Councillor Sperring's motion there, and the phrase that springs to my mind is.
Point of order, Madam Chairman. There was a motion on the floor. No other motion can be.
Sorry, yes, there is a motion on the floor. Sorry, Councillor Steptoe, you can't do that.
If I can just finish what I was going to say was, my biggest concern is if we don't use it, we're going to lose it, and we'll have some other council putting their homeless in their place.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mrs Hoy, please.
Yeah, I will be supporting the motion. We do have a big problem of homelessness in Rochford. I mean, I have been to Southend, so I know I've seen firsthand what it's like to be homeless. I mean, Sanctuary, I can only go by Tyndale House in Holbridge. They are ruthless, and that's the only word I can describe for them. So I will be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Mrs. Hall. Okay, members.
Chairman, I'm rising to ask members to join me in recorded vote.
So I'm going to say there's a motion on the floor now.
Chairman, you've got a motion on the floor and you need to take a recorded vote.
There is a motion on the floor by Councillor Mr. John Mason, seconded by Councillor Mr. Hoy, and I understand you want a recorded vote.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. So the motion is that the review committee carry out an investigation.
You can sit, councillors.
The motion is that the review committee carry out an investigation and put recommendations back to full council. Thank you.
Councillor Black.
4.
Councillor Burton.
4.
Councillor Carter. Councillor Mrs. Kassar.
4.
Councillor Cooper.
4.
Councillor Dray. Councillor Efty.
4.
Councillor Eaves. Councillor Griffin. Councillor Hazelwood. Councillor Hookway. Councillor Diane Hoy. Councillor Michael Hoy.
4.
Councillor Mrs. Hughes. Councillor Ioannou. Councillor Lucas Gill. Councillor Christine Mason.
4.
Councillor Elliot Mason. Councillor John Mason.
4.
Councillor Merrick. Councillor Milne. Councillor Mountain.
4.
Councillor Newport.
4.
Councillor Oldham.
4.
Councillor Mrs. Rowe. Councillor Mrs. Shaw. Councillor Smith. Councillor Sperring. Councillor Stanley.
4.
Councillor Steptoe. Councillor Webb. Councillor Mrs. Weston. Councillor Williams. Councillor Wilson.
Members, the motion is carried. Can we ask the other councillors? Oh yeah. I'm not sure if the residents are going to carry on staying here after that item, but you're most welcome to continue staying if you wish, or if you wish to leave, by all means. councillors. Oh, no, one's coming.
Not many people left, is there? I missed that. What's interesting about
Okay, councillors, can we carry on? Yes, Mike. Yes, Mr. Steptoe.
Chairman, could I just ask when the review committee is likely to meet and be reporting back to this council?
Is that a question for the meeting this evening?
If I can try and address that, I mean, I'm only the current chairman, so obviously I think we would put into plans that it would be as soon as possible. It would be probably an extra meeting of the review committee to discuss this, because I'd imagine it'd be quite a contentious and lengthy meeting. I'd have to seek the support of committee members and discuss it with Paul Gowers before we could actually do it, and as that isn't possible tonight, it's very difficult to give an exact answer, but rest assured, either myself or whoever is chair of the review committee in the next municipal year, I'm sure we'll look to have this debated as soon as possible.
Thank you, Councillor, very much.
Councillor Mason.
Sorry, Councillor John Mason, please.
Chairman, that seemed an open question, so I felt obliged, or at least empowered, to respond as well. I mean, I'd welcome a review committee as soon as possible, as Councillor Burton says, but actually I'd welcome one before annual council. So there's a challenge to members of review committee: meet and decide on this matter and pass it back to the next full council. Having listened carefully to what other members are concerned about, that would be the best way of dealing with it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor John Mason.
Just to respond to that, yep, that's absolutely fine. I'll take that up with Paul Gowers and members of the committee tomorrow with the view to setting a date.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 7, members. Member questions on notice. Councillor Black, please.
Thank you. My first question is, as of the 10th of April this year, how many planning enforcement cases were outstanding?
Councillor Ward, are you going to answer the question, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. To date, there are 265 cases outstanding as of the 10th of April 2017. Of these, 235 cases are currently being investigated and 30 are being monitored following formal action. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Councillor Black, please.
Yes, I'd like to ask a supplementary to that. Do you believe that we have enough resources in terms of money and in terms of staff to reduce that number to a more reasonable level?
Councillor Ward, please.
With regard to staff and finances, I believe this is something that we are constantly been looking at. We understand there are needs, and those are things that we are considering constantly.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Councillor Black, please.
Thank you. As of the 10th of April this year, how many full-time planning officers were directly employed by the council and not on sick leave, parental leave or on holiday?
Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. As of the 10th of April, there were 3 of 6 development management planning officers directly employed by the council in the office.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Councillor Black, third question, please.
Yes, my third question is, how many cases are you aware of for 2017, this year, where a notice of decision indicates the wrong information, i.e. incorrectly states that the application has been passed when the actual decision was to refuse, or vice versa?
Councillor Ian Ward, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. There is only one case where a notice of decision indicated incorrect information.
Thank you, Councillor Ward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Black. Item 8, business from the last council meeting, there is none. Item 9, to note the minutes of the executive and committee meetings held between the period 7th of February to the 17th of April as listed. Noted, members?
Noted.
Item 10, to consider any reports from the executive and committees to council. Councillor Black, I believe you're going to, please.
Yep. Thank you, Chairman. As you'll see there,
Sorry, I apologise, Councillor Black.
agenda item 10.1, which is the review committee on the review of the Constitution. The review committee project team was created consisting of cross-party members to undertake an overdue review of the Council's Constitution. At first glance, the report which has been circulated to members probably appears rather lengthy at 77 pages. However, this is merely so that members can clearly see the proposed changes and review how these changes will appear once the Constitution has been amended. As the report informed members, the proposed changes have been discussed at length with the monitoring officer and agreed upon between all members. The purpose of this review was to update and include natural changes that required alterations, such as changes in personnel, etc. It was also to ensure the language used was clearer and more up-to-date, information and guidance within was consistent and correct, and that overall it became slightly less challenging to follow. The project team, along with the monitoring officer and the overview and scrutiny officer, were all aware from the outset that this could be a lengthy project to work on, and all agreed that working towards specific milestones with a view to completing this project in phases would be the best way forward, and that it was highly likely that these milestones would have to be flexible. As you can see, the project team have almost completed parts 1 and 2, and part 3 will be completed as soon as possible going into the next municipal year. If any members have any questions or queries regarding this ongoing project, can I please ask them to refer these to either myself or, probably more appropriately, our monitoring officer. Thank you.
Otherwise, the recommendation of, on page 10.1, both together, it is proposed that the Council resolves item 1 and item 2 of that. Is that agreed, members?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Burton, annual report of the review committee, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Members have also had a chance to review the review committee's annual report, which has been circulated. The content of this report is pretty self-explanatory and provides members and non-members with fairly detailed information on the work the review committee has undertaken during the past 12 months, which I hope will be of interest to all. On a personal note, as I've chaired my last review committee meeting, well, I thought I had, of the current municipal year, I'll take this opportunity anyway to thank members for both their time and patience, and in particular their support throughout the last 12 months. I've thoroughly enjoyed chairing this committee, and it's been a privilege to get to know so many members from other parties whom I may not have had the chance to get to know otherwise. In particular, I'd like to thank my Vice Chairman, Councillor Hazelwood, for his assistance and encouragement. I've really enjoyed working alongside you, Brian, and also to both Paul Gowes and Michelle Powell for their guidance and help, which has been very much appreciated, not to mention invaluable at times. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Any questions, members? No? It is on page 10.2. It is proposed that the Council resolves to receive the annual report as attached in Appendix 2. Is that agreed, members?
Right.
Number 11, report on urgent decisions. There are none. Number 12, report of the leader on the work of the exec. I understand that Councillor Mike Steptoe is going to...
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm sure you've all spotted that I'm not Councillor Cutmore, so and my commiserations to Councillor Burton. I know what it's like when the Chairman gets names muddled up. So. Right, here we go. This is the 5th Ordinary Council meeting of 2016-17 municipal year. Since the annual council, I would like to welcome all members. Since the meeting of the 21st of February, the Executive has met once, during which consideration was given to the Quarter 3 2016-17 Financial Management Report. It was agreed that £4,500 be drawn down from the Play Spaces 217-18 capital budget for the purpose of match funding, and that the authority be delegated to the Assistant Director, Environmental Services, in consultation with the portfolio holder for environment, to approve a grant award of £45,000 from Corey Environmental Trust and consequently execute the project. Other matters that my colleagues and I have on the executive have been dealing with include adopting a new model licence conditions and guidance for dog boarding and home dog boarding licensing, agreeing to increase the authority fare tariff for Hackney carriages, agreeing the South East Essex Strategic Planning Memorandum of Understanding 2017. As always, I will be happy to take any questions from members in respect to the work of the Executive, and I'm sure my Executive colleagues will be happy to contribute where appropriate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mike Steptoe. Any questions? Councillor Black, please.
Ask questions. The South Essex Strategic Planning Memorandum of Understanding for 2017, could one of the portfolio holders please clarify for members what that involves and what the implications are, please?
Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The Memorandum of Understanding is basically the concept of the various councils and boroughs working together in a way in which they actually understand fundamentally what they're trying to do. So it's at a very strategic level. I think my AD, who was one of the main people who was working with it, would probably be better explaining this in detail.
What happened for the portfolio holders to continue?
Chairman, yes, just to sort of clarify, I'm not sure how much detail you want to know, but sorry? Okay. It basically sets out the parameters and framework for the planning authorities of South Essex to work under the duty to cooperate, to understand how they deal with strategic planning matters between the cross-boundary areas within South Essex. So that includes Basildon, Thurrock, Castle Point, Rochford and Southend.
No more questions? Item 13, Councillor John Mason, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think this has calmed down now, isn't it? I obviously beat it into submission. Okay. You'll probably know that the proper officer reports that, pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 13, the following motion has been received from Councillors J.R.F. Mason, me, Councillor Mrs. C.M. Mason, M. Hoy, E.O.K. Mason, Mrs. T.R. Hughes, J.E. Newport, S.A. Wilson, A.H. Eves and C.I. Black. The motion reads, this council wishes to and agrees to invite the local NHS organisations to undertake presentations at a full council or a special additional full council on the proposed changes, particularly to A&E provision and elective surgery location and capacity, no later than 14 days before the closure of any public consultation arranged by the NHS. Notwithstanding the above, full council agrees to have a full debate at a full council or a special additional full council on the proposed changes no later than 14 days before the closure of any public consultation arranged by the NHS. And as you can tell, Chairman, I must have been frightened by a lawyer the moment I put my pen to paper, but that is the motion.
Thank you. The motion is moved. The motion is moved and, sorry, it needs to be moved apparently, yes. The motion is moved. Councillor Mrs.
I was just going to second the motion.
Okay. Councillor John Mason, you're going to move the motion and Councillor Mrs. Mason is going to second it, yes?
Chairman, for the sake of good order, I so move. I didn't use those words, but I so move now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Simon Smith, please.
I must admit to a slight degree of ignorance at this point, that I don't know, in all honesty, how frequently and how often the NHS go out to consult on changes. And my only concern with this motion is that we could be here every week having a debate. I don't know whether that is the case or whether it's likely to be once or twice a year. But I think it is important to have some knowledge in that area, and my ignorance doesn't allow me to make an informed decision at this moment in time. Thank you.
Councillor Mr. John Mason.
And answer that. We were blessed in certain respects that the NHS came to the review committee. I believe it was November, and during questioning, which we normally do in review committee, we asked the then Chief Executive of Southend University Trust Hospital when the consultation would take place. And the consultation, we were advised, would take place after the County Council elections, but in May. So we can expect this consultation in May. However, we now have a general election. So I don't know how the NHS fits in with a general election, but for Councillor Smith's view, a suggestion for Councillor Smith to consider, maybe June?
Councillor Black, please.
Yes, I'd like to support the motion. Obviously, I was glad to support it. This isn't just a consultation on something obscure in the NHS. It's something pretty fundamental regarding actions in emergency and some other features. And I think it's only right and proper that we look after the interests of our residents and we get a full presentation and we let the NHS know what we think about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Black. Councillor Hookway, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My name isn't on the motion. If I had the opportunity to put it on it, I would do now. I do support it, and I hope my colleagues do support this as well. I think this is a very well worded motion, and it's all about informing us as our residents' representatives and allowing public debate so that people can understand what is going on with our local health service. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hookway. Right, members, it's been moved and seconded. Oh, sorry, Councillor Hoy, Michael Hoy, please.
Sorry, I will be brief. I don't think I've got a lot to add. I just say I too was at the review committee and I found the presentation there quite informative, but it did show that there was a lot of information that I still didn't know, and I think a debate at full council on this matter would be very, very useful for all members. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hoy. Do we all agree, or do we want to? Show of hands. All agree? All agree.
Great.
Thank you, members. 14, pay policy statement. To consider the report of the Managing Director on the pay policy statement for 2017-18, and Sean will present.
Chairman, I just actually have one particular comment, a minor correction from, well, actually perhaps not so minor. If I can draw members' attention to paragraph 3.5 of the report, the mention there is of the Hutton review of fair pay, and it mentions mean average earnings. That should be median average earnings. So that's a correction. And members, that follows through to the pay policy into paragraph 7.1, where the same correction needs to be applied. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? It is proposed that Council resolves that the pay policy statement for 2017-18 be adopted with that minor amendment. Is that agreed, members?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 15, purpose-built doctor surgery, successfully national business rates appeals. Matt Petley, please. Oh, Mr. Manning, sorry. Mr. Manning.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening everyone. If I break into a cough, I do apologise. So, okay, I'll keep this brief. Unfortunately, there's been a legal case that was a test case carried out in 2016-17, so the year just gone, where purpose-built doctors' surgeries were able to appeal their rateable value for business rates. This was successful, and 4 of the purpose-built doctor surgeries we have in the region or in the district are have been successful in their appeals as well, and that has meant that we have to pay back or refund about £408,000 worth of business rates. Now, we were aware of this. We were certainly aware that there was something coming, so we raised this through something called the appeals provision. But what we won't know is exactly how much or what that was going to be. So we took an estimate of what that would be at around £318,000. So unfortunately, there is a shortfall, and that shortfall has to be found through the precepting authorities, so for ourselves, through Essex County Council, Essex Fire and Essex Police. Part of that is that Rochford has to take the 40% hit on that number, which would mean for us would be the shortfall would be around £35,000. Now, £35,000 will come straight from our general balance, our general reserve. Now, the good news is our general reserve at the moment is fairly healthy, so that 35,000 won't make a huge dent in it. Clearly, it's not great, but it's at least something we can absorb relatively easily, he says. What I'm more concerned about is obviously that's only 4 of the purpose-built doctor surgeries. There are another 7 out there which have still yet to have their rateable value confirmed, whether their case will be approved or not. That could be, if we use the same logic that was used on the first 4, it could be a further impact of about £390,000. Again, 40% of that would be about £156,000 hit for Rochford. We can build that into next year's, into our funding from our general balance again this year, so we've got a provision ready for it. And as you'll note in table 3.5, we've actually got a fairly healthy general balance at the moment, and it's got slightly healthier because we have had an underspend, or so far we're forecasting an underspend for 2016-17, which will more than absorb this this provision. So the budget for 2017-18 is still secure, and financially we're still in a good shape compared to where we were previously. It's the fact that basically the underspend from last year is going to fund this appeal shortfall. So I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Black, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, obviously it's concerning and the impact on us. I've got a couple of questions. First of all, I've always thought, well, at least in 2000, this goes back to 2010, but in the past, NNDR was collected by districts and then sent on to central government.
Yes.
How come we end up footing the bill for this? That's my first question.
Okay.
Secondly, although the report says it provides details of the appeal, it doesn't really explain the rationale behind it.
Okay.
And I was wondering, if the principle is established for purpose-built doctor surgeries, does it apply to other premises like purpose-built dental surgeries or purpose-built private schools or anything like that, or purpose-built hospitals? I mean, for one thing, we talked at the previous item about the proposed changes in the NHS, and I am totally opposed to any downgrading of the A&E at Southend. So I suppose if any money goes to Southend Hospital in any way, I'll be grateful. But is there a risk that hospitals or other buildings like that also will have their rates reduced in NNDR reduced greatly? Thank you.
Rob, do you want to answer those
Yeah,
questions?
yes, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Black. So the first question was it was yes. So in 2010, that's correct. Sorry. So NNDR in 2010, we did collect fully, and we gave back to government, and then we got it back through something called the RSG, the Revenue Support Grant. In 2011, I believe that changed. So they gave us the power to say you can collect business rates and you can keep it, but therefore you now take the risk entirely on the appeals provision. So that was part of the funding review that was done in 2011, 2012, I believe. Unfortunately, that's the situation we're in. We don't have a choice with that. If we quickly, the prospect of in the future of 100% business rates, they have talked about maybe taking appeals provision back into central government because, I mean, let's be honest, the impact we've had, 35,000, potentially another 150,000, is fairly minor. I know the appeals provision at the moment in Basildon Council is around 8 to 9 million. So we've got to, we'll put this into context. We've Touchwood been fairly lightly touched on this. So, but it is something we are constantly keeping an eye on. Business rates for me is one of the single biggest risks we have. In terms of your second question, what actually changed was, and I won't go into reading into the detail, but basically the original valuation was based upon the rental value. So it was as if that doctor's surgery wasn't a doctor's surgery in effect. It was a house or a home, a unit for whatever space, and that could be rented for X. That would be the rateable value. What they successfully appealed against and said, well, we would never rent them out. We are purpose-built doctor's surgeries. We are not homes or houses or anything else or businesses. So therefore, we should only pay the basic construction cost, the replacement cost, which is in this case around 50% reduction. That's the major change. Your third part, yes, there is a huge risk around NHS. All NHS provision at the moment is going as high as it can possibly go in the country because many of the NHS trusts are raising appeals against their business rates. So if you stand back and look at this from a resident of the country, it doesn't really matter, does it? It's robbing Peter to pay Paul. If they don't give us the money, then it goes to the NHS. It's still only the money sloshing around the system. So we are hoping that the government are going to be quite sensible about this and actually stop any further provision, certainly on the bigger things. But it's certainly a risk, and there's lots of work going on in the background at the moment. I think there's lawyers involved from the whole of the local government association and looking at this. So it's a big issue. Yes.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Sorry, Simon, Councillor Smith.
Yes, I'd just like to reiterate to members that the reason why we're in this situation is not because any sort of mistake or misjudgment has happened in Rochford. These are factors way beyond our control, and essentially we have just been passengers on this ride. I will say through good management of our finances by Rob and by Denise Murray beforehand, we are in a position to absorb this one, unpalatable as it is. However, it is a bit of a worry where the future might go, but we are hoping that common sense will prevail ultimately. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor John Mason, please.
Chairman, I'm very grateful for Councillor Black having raised that potential and for Mr Manning to have considered it. But it's worried me now because I just wonder how big that risk is for us from the NHS in Rochford District.
Yeah.
I think of parts of Rochford Hospital that are still operating. I presume that hospital was purpose-built in its time, a long time ago. Is that the sort of building that we would be at risk for reclaim of business rates?
So if I can answer.
And before I go, I'd just like to agree completely with Councillor Black, who used a very good opportunity to say, and I will say too, I'm totally against the Southend A&E not becoming a walk-in and not a fully functional A&E as well. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. So, yes, Councillor Mason. At the moment, my understanding is the Rochford Hospital won't be impacted by this decision, or certainly hasn't been in terms of the scope of the other trusts that have put themselves forward, certainly in terms of the type of building and the type of property. However, I'm not going to say that's not forever. So at the moment, we're keeping much more of a watching brief on it rather than raising a specific provision. But I'll be honest, this is discussed certainly every month at the EFOA, the Essex Finance Officers Association. It's right up there on our top agenda at the moment. We are certainly, I don't see us being impacted immediately, but as soon as we start to see the similar types of properties that Rochford has, then we would start to raise this as an issue. So, yes.
Members, the recommendation on 15.3, it is proposed to the council resolves 1 and 2. Is that agreed, members?
Agreed.
Right, number 16, members of the public, we have come to the end of the business that we can debate with you present. The remaining report contains exempt information, and I would therefore ask that you now leave the meeting.
On a point of order, please, Chairman. Come on first. Thank you, Chairman. With regard to item 18, I believe this could be heard in public, and it is in the public interest to be heard. I think it could be heard with the removal of just a very few items from the report, and I would not agree to the exclusion on that basis.
Can we do 18 first? No, we can do 18 first if you prefer, members.
Chairman, if I may, the report itself does contain financial information from contractors, and it is my advice that it should remain exempt.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Hoy.
So, as I pointed out, there are some items within it. However, the report is one of these reports where I think the Managing Director did email round to Council saying that this would be sorted out. This report can be heard in public with the removal of certain items. I think the report was being prepared with those items in it, so it can't be heard in public, and it is, in my view, in the public interest.
In which case, Chairman, you take a vote on whether remains confidential.
Okay, members, I think what we better do is, because on purple paper, we better take a vote to see whether the item is going to be private and confidential. Yes, Councillor Swearing.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Hoy has just said that an email went round. I've just checked with my colleagues. None of us have seen an email about anything.
No? Yes, Councillor Mason.
Yeah, Chairman, the Managing Director in November, and I didn't actually remember the date, but he acknowledged it today, so he knows what I'm talking about, sent an email to all members in which he set out a particular instruction to officers. And the instruction to officers was to consider exempt reports and in a practical sense to determine that there were parts, and it would be rare if they couldn't be heard in public, but there should be an exempt appendix. And Councillor Hoy is properly applying to this debate by reminding members that they all received that email. And the issue tonight is not about whether this particular report has to say an exempt, but the fact that his instructions have not been properly carried out. Officers have been quite properly instructed to consider all exempt reports, to consider them with the monitoring officer, but in particular to consider whether part of them can be heard in public, and the exempt parts to be put in an appendix. And therefore what we have here tonight is a situation where we're not serving democracy, we're not serving transparency at all. We've put 4 items into exempt when frankly that's almost unprecedented. The Managing Director agrees with me today. It is unprecedented. But what's even more unprecedented is that many of these reports, including item 18, there are implications, and those implications should be made known to the public at the very least. And at the moment, and as things continue, they will be completely unaware of what is going on in this council, and that is totally unacceptable to me. Totally.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Councillor Smith, please.
Chairman, I'm not going to say whether I agree with Councillor Mason's points or not, but I believe he's opening up a debate which is not for the here and now. What we have before us is an agenda. On the agenda is an item that's on purple paper. We have had specific advice from our legal officer that they believe that it should remain in P&C, and I think we need to have the vote, if that's the way you feel it's appropriate, to determine whether we keep it in P&C. I don't believe that the debate should be opened up to things outside the agenda at this moment in time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Black, please.
Share Councillor Mason and Councillor Hoy's concerns about the item 18. I'm also looking at another item here, and I won't say which one it is. It's another exempt appendix, where it refers to the fact that members wished for something to be recorded And having it recorded and in P&C effectively means it's not really recorded because nobody's ever going to see it. And I don't see, and it's on page 1 of that exempt appendix, and it's the 3rd paragraph down, 3rd bullet point down, and I don't see why that is in exempt, because it's members doing their job on the review committee and feeling frustrated on the review committee that a question's not been answered, and I think that should not be exempt, and I query why it's exempt, and I think it's awfully convenient that it's exempt.
Thank you, Councillor Black. Councillor Mountain, please.
For any members that are unsure about this email, it was sent on Monday the 7th of November. I find it astonishing that 5 months later, some members are unaware and this has become an issue. This shouldn't be an issue. It shouldn't be an issue.
Thank you, Councillor Mountain. Councillor Wilson, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could I ask how items become unexempt? Is there a mechanism for doing this? Is there a mechanism for reviewing it? Because my experience, I've worked in central government, and what happens is after a certain period, information is reviewed and where necessary, downgraded. And there doesn't seem to be a mechanism for this to happen in our council.
I think at the moment we're debating on something that is on purple paper, and I think we're going to just take a vote on it. Sorry, members, but otherwise we'll go on all night debating on a... Can do, yeah.
Chairman, reports that have been determined as exempt by the monitoring officer, if there's a point when the items within the report are no longer confidential or legal privilege or whatever the reasons, those reports can be made publicly available, and some councils at times do that, or officers conclude that they don't stay exempt necessarily. But at this point in time, the reports before members that are on purple paper are very much covering areas that are potentially something that's best for the council's sake kept in the council domain. However, as the chairman's suggesting, there could be a vote on whether item 18, in terms of discussion, that discussion's public or private. The only possibility is that it is about avoiding discussion that might bring out something that for the council and residents' sake is best at this point, not kept confidential. The only other aspect is that the minute from any meeting like this meeting should give a real flavour and an indication of what the item was about. Chairman, that's it. Yeah.
One more, Councillor Black, please.
I hear what Mr Bostock says. I wonder if you could look at the purple paper regarding an exempt appendix on the review committee and explain to me. I don't see why that third bullet point should be in private confidential. The one that begins, members wished it to be recorded.
Chairman, my apologies. I'm looking at page 17.1 and 17.2.
Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the exempt. Yes, sorry. Exempt item number. What's the exempt item? No, it's this one here. That one there. That one there. No, that one there.
Members, please. Are we talking about item 18 here?
The exempt appendix to the review committee of the 4th of April this year.
Which paper are you looking at, Councillor Black?
I can't see a number on it.
Not at the very bottom.
No, I can't. Sorry, this one.
Just need to vote on whether we're having 18 and...
Okay. Well, no, but I'm asking why this is exempt.
Chairman, the document that Councillor Black has is an exempt appendix. It's actually the appendix to the Review Committee's minutes. Which do form part of the report that is exempt item 17 that's before members tonight.
It's all about 18, about whether to take 18 or not.
Chairman, perhaps Councillor Black could clarify the third bullet point. Yeah. Yeah, all right. Yeah, cheers.
Vote on 18.
Chairman, you're going to take a vote on whether item 18 remains.
Yeah.
Okay, members, we're going to take a vote on whether... Sorry, Councillor Mrs Mason. Quick one, please.
A very quick one for clarity. I mean, this exempt item 17 is unattributed. We don't actually know who wrote it. But I think the point of concern that Councillor Black is saying is that it's a copy of the exempt appendix, except for 1.1, 1.2 and 1.3. Is that correct? So why that additional bit has, and why the managing director's instructions haven't been followed out, has caused all this confusion today. So hopefully that will be rectified in future.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs
Thank
Mason. Okay, members, we're going to take a vote on item 18, whether it's P&C or not. Can we...
Yeah.
Right, item 18, to agree a P&C in this council for the...
Item 18.
to leave the chamber is, can I have your agreement to, yes, is it private and confidential?
Chairman, I'm sorry, but I'm not clear on what I'm voting here, I'm afraid.
The purple paper, item 18, is it P&C in this chamber this evening, which means that members of the public have to leave. So it's for purple paper being P&C.
Those in favour.
So those in favour of being P&C, can you please indicate?
Favour. Yes. Seventeen. 18.
And against members, please.
Chairman, I would
I would
like
like
my vote against to be recorded in the minutes.
And that is lost, members, and your vote will be recorded.
That's my name.
Okay, the vote has been taken. We've got members who want to voted to be acknowledged, and therefore, can the members of the public please leave the chamber? It was 18 against 19.
No, wasn't right.
19 for and 18 against, wasn't it?
Thank you.
19 for and 18 against, wasn't it?
Madam Chairman, Madam Chairman, could I question that? Because as far as I was aware, it was the other way round.
19 for P&C and 18 against P&C.
Yeah, that's what I'll make it.
Okay,
That's
thank
what I
you.
believe. Is that right? Are you sure?
Someone's going to count over 30 now.
Keep going, just keep going.
It seems as a dispute.
Shall we take the vote again, members? Shall we say,
There's 36 people in here.
just a count of hands for the purple paper to be P and... Okay.
You will be using the casting vote. There wasn't that many people in the chamber. You'll be casting the vote unless the John Griffin's playing silly horse. Oh no.
It was 18, 19. It was right.
No, there's only 36 people in here.
Oh. So we're taking a recorded vote now, members.
Can you just, for argument's sake, just clarify what we're voting on?
Right, we're voting the purple paper, item 18, to be P&C. So the members of the public have to leave. If it's not P&C, then they can come back in again, but they've probably gone home now.
Councillor Black. Councillor Burton. Councillor Carter. Councillor Mrs Kassar. Councillor Cooper. Councillor Dre. Councillor Efty. Councillor Eaves. Councillor Griffin. Councillor Hazelwood. Councillor Hookway. Councillor Diane Hoy. Councillor Michael Hoy. Councillor Mrs Hughes. Councillor Ioannou. Councillor Lucas Gill.
When she says it's 18, you say...
Councillor Mrs Lumley. Councillor Christine Mason. Councillor Elliot Mason. Councillor John Mason.
Based on legal advice.
Councillor Merrick. Councillor Milne. Councillor Mountain.
Formal legal advice.
Councillor Newport. Councillor Oldham. Councillor Mrs Rowe. Councillor Mrs Shaw. Councillor Smith.
For.
Councillor Sperring. Councillor Stanley. Councillor Steptoe. Councillor Ward. Councillor Webb. Councillor Mrs Weston.
For.
Councillor Williams. Councillor Wilson.
Chairman, that's equal, so it's...
It's equal, 18-18, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to use my casting vote. I'm going by the legal team, and because it's on purple paper, I'm afraid I'm for. So, purple paper is P&C.